The rain struck the tall windows of Montford House like a warning that refused to be ignored. It soaked through Lady Clara Ashcombe's worn traveling cloak and dripped onto the white marble floor of the entrance hall. She stood still, watching the water pool at her feet, feeling the familiar weight of shame tighten in her chest. Once, she had arrived at houses like this as a guest. Now she arrived as a woman, with nothing left but her pride. Since her father's death 18 months earlier, pride was the only thing no one had managed to take from her. "His Grace will see you now," the butler said. His voice was polite, controlled, but his eyes betrayed a flash of pity before he turned away. Clara lifted her chin and followed him through long corridors lined with painted faces of Montford's long dead. Their cold eyes seemed to judge her damp hem, her plain gloves, her reduced place in the world. Every step reminded her how far she had fallen. The study smelled of leather, ink, and power. Behind a massive desk sat Julian Montford, 5th Duke of Montford. He did not look up. Clara waited. The silence stretched until it became heavy. At last, he set down his pen. "Lady Clara Ashcombe," he said coolly, "daughter of the late Earl of Ashcombe. Your estate is heavily mortgaged and facing foreclosure within the quarter." Heat rushed to her face, but she did not lower her eyes. "You are very well informed about my private affairs, Your Grace. It is my business to be informed about anyone who enters my household." He finally looked at her, and the impact was sharp. He was striking in a severe way, all sharp lines and stillness. His gray eyes were cold, unreadable. He looked like a man who ruled without question. "You come recommended," he continued. "You are educated, accomplished, capable of instructing my daughter." "I am grateful for Lady Westbrook's kindness," Clara said. "I have not finished." The words landed like a command. Clara closed her mouth. "My daughter is 6, he said. She has been difficult since her mother's death. 4 instructresses have left in 18 months. "Perhaps," Clara said carefully, "the child needs understanding rather than—" "What the child needs is discipline," he interrupted, standing. "Structure, control, not sentiment." Clara felt something hot rise in her chest. "And affection?" she asked. "Kindness?" His eyes hardened. "You are not here to lecture me," he said softly. "You are here because you are desperate." The insult struck deep. Her hands clenched in her skirts. She should apologize. She needed this position. But some things could not be swallowed. "I apologize for speaking out of turn," she said steadily. "But if we are to be clear, then so should I be. I am not trained for service. I am a gentlewoman in reduced circumstances. I will care for your daughter, but I will not be treated as less than human, and I will not stay silent if I believe a child is being harmed." The room went very still. "You have extraordinary audacity," the Duke said. "I wonder if you can afford it." "I wonder," Clara replied evenly, "if you can afford to lose another instructress." For a long moment they stared at one another. Then, to her shock, something like amusement flickered across his face. "Very well," he said. "1 month's trial, £15 per year, East Wing. You report to me weekly." It was an insultingly low wage, but Clara nodded. "I accept. You begin tomorrow." He turned back to his ledger as if she no longer existed. That night, alone in her narrow room, Clara told herself she could endure anything, even a cold duke who looked at her like an entry in his accounts. She did not yet know how wrong she was. The nursery was quiet when she entered the next morning. Curtains drawn, a small figure sat curled in the window seat. "Lady Eloin?" Clara said gently. No response. The child wore gray, severe and joyless. Her dark hair was pulled tight. She held a rag doll and stared at nothing. "I'm Lady Clara Ashcombe," Clara said, sitting nearby. "I'm to be your companion." Silence. "I've heard you're very clever," she continued, "that you read well and know your sums." A flicker of interest passed through the girl's eyes and vanished. "I was hoping," Clara said thoughtfully, "that you might help me. This house is enormous. I might get lost. Could you show me around?" At last, a whisper. "You'll leave too." Clara's heart tightened. "Who leaves?" "Everyone," the child said flatly. "Mama, all the teachers. Papa says I drive them away." Clara moved closer. "You haven't driven anyone away," she said softly. "You've been sad." "My papa says sadness is no excuse. Even papas can be wrong sometimes." The child looked at her sharply. "You can't say that." Clara smiled faintly. "I've been called worse." A ghost of a smile touched the girl's lips. They walked the house together. By the time they reached the library, Eloin was talking excitedly about books and globes and ladders. Watching the child's small hand slip trustingly into hers, Clara made a quiet decision. Some rules were worth breaking. 3 days later, laughter echoed through Montford House. The Dowager Duchess Beatrice Montford noticed immediately. She noticed everything. At breakfast, she heard the sound and froze. "Who," she asked calmly, "is making my granddaughter laugh?" "Lady Clara, your grace," the housekeeper replied, smiling. Beatrice's eyebrows rose. Later that morning, Julian Montford heard it too. A ridiculous song floated through his study window, followed by childish laughter. He went to the window. Below, in the garden, his daughter ran freely. Her hair was loose, her dress stained with grass. And beside her stood Lady Clara Ashcombe, laughing just as freely. Something sharp lodged in his chest. He told himself it was irritation. He was wrong. That evening, Clara stood once more in his study, delivering her weekly report. He read it in silence. "You have taught my daughter to sing," he said flatly. "Yes." "About ducks?" "Yes." "I hired you to educate her." "You hired me to be her companion." The air between them crackled. "I can hire 50 women like you," he said coldly. "Do it," Clara replied, "but I won't be one of them." The door opened before he could respond. "Papa!" Eloin stood there, crying. "Please don't send her away," she begged. "I'll be good." Julian dropped to his knees, stunned by his daughter's fear. "No one is leaving," he said softly. That night, Clara told a story in the nursery. Julian listened from the shadows. When it ended, he spoke quietly. "Thank you." "You're welcome," she said, "but I don't do this for you." She walked away, her heart pounding. Julian Montford stood alone in the hall, staring after her. He was not done. After that night, nothing at Montford House remained the same, though no one spoke of it aloud. The change crept in quietly, like dawn light slipping under a closed door. Julian Montford began to notice things he had trained himself not to see. He noticed the sound of his daughter's footsteps running instead of walking in careful silence. He noticed laughter at breakfast drifting down the corridor outside his study. He noticed the way the house no longer felt like a tomb built of duty and stone. And he noticed Lady Clara Ashcombe. She did not seek his attention. That unsettled him more than open defiance ever had. She moved through the house with calm purpose, greeting servants by name, listening instead of commanding. She spoke to Eloin with patience and warmth, never once using fear as a tool. Julian told himself it was inefficient, undisciplined. Yet every evening, when he passed the nursery, he paused. Sometimes he heard reading, sometimes music, sometimes quiet conversation that carried more comfort than any lesson plan ever could. Eloin began taking her meals in the morning room with her grandmother. Her gray dresses were replaced with soft colors. Her eyes no longer darted nervously when her father entered a room. And Julian did not know how to feel about any of it. One afternoon he stood in the doorway of the schoolroom and watched silently. Eloin struggled with a sum, brow-furrowed, pencil tapping. "You can do it," Clara said gently. "Take your time." Julian almost stepped forward to correct her. Old habits burned in his chest. But he stayed still. A moment later, Eloin's face lit up. "I understand now," she said proudly. Julian felt something loosen inside him, something old and tight. That night, after Eloin ran off to play, he remained behind. "You allow her to struggle," he said. "So she can learn she is capable," Clara replied. "I have been too rigid," he admitted abruptly. She did not smile. She did not press her advantage. "You were afraid," she said simply. The words struck harder than accusation. Julian turned away, staring out the window. "My wife was ill for months," he said quietly. "I did not see it. When I finally did, it was too late." Clara said nothing. "So I learned control," he continued. "I learned vigilance. I learned to never miss anything again. And in doing so," she said softly, "you nearly lost your daughter." The truth settled between them, heavy but honest. That night, Julian lay awake longer than he cared to admit. 3 weeks passed. Montford House softened. Julian joined Eloin's lessons. First standing stiffly near the door, then sitting nearby, then participating. He watched Clara with his daughter and felt something unfamiliar stir. Respect, yes. Gratitude, and something more dangerous he did not yet name. The Dowager Duchess Beatrice noticed that too. "My dear," she said one evening, cornering Clara in the library, "you have done something extraordinary. I have only done what was needed." "And so rarely done," Beatrice replied. "You have brought my son back from himself." Clara lowered her eyes. "I am only here for Eloin." Beatrice smiled knowingly. "Of course you are." The tension between Clara and Julian grew heavier with each passing day. It lived in glances held too long, in hands brushing when books were passed, in silences that said too much. One cold afternoon, Clara stepped into the garden without her cloak. "You will catch cold," Julian said sharply, shrugging off his own coat and placing it around her shoulders. Their hands lingered. For one heartbeat too long. They sprang apart when Eloin came running. That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Julian's coat folded neatly across the chair. She told herself it meant nothing. She did not believe it. The breaking point came days later. Julian summoned her to his study. "You work too much," he said without preamble. "You take on duties beyond your position." "I do not mind." "I do." He leaned back, studying her. "I am increasing your salary and formally naming you governess." The words felt like a wall rising between them. "Thank you," Clara said stiffly. "If that is all." She reached the door before his voice stopped her. "You are angry." "No," she said quietly. "You have simply reminded me of my place." He stood, frustration radiating from him. "I am trying to do the right thing." "The right thing would have been distance," she said, turning back. "Not confusion." He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped inches from her. "You think I do not know that?" he said hoarsely. "I have fought it every day." "Then stop fighting," she whispered, "or stop looking at me like that." Silence. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was desperate, restrained, longing finally breaking free. Clara's resolve shattered. She kissed him back, hands gripping his coat, heart racing. They did not hear the door open. "Oh my," Beatrice said brightly. They broke apart at once. "This is exactly what it looks like," Beatrice continued calmly, "and about time." Clara wanted the floor to swallow her. "You love her," Beatrice said to Julian, "and she loves you." Julian looked at Clara. "I do," he said, completely. Clara's breath caught. "I love you too," she admitted softly. Eloin burst in moments later, eyes shining. "You're not sending her away," she said hopefully. "Never," Julian promised. That promise changed everything. The engagement was announced at Christmas. At first, reactions were polite. Then the newspapers began. They called her a schemer, a fortune hunter, A governess who trapped a duke. Clara bore it quietly, but Julian saw the light dim in her eyes. "Maybe we should wait," she said one night. "Let society forget." "No," Julian said fiercely. "I will not let them define you." But the gossip grew worse, until Beatrice uncovered the truth. "It is Amelia," she said grimly. "She feeds the papers." Julian clenched his jaw. Beatrice smiled thinly. "We will answer gossip with truth," she said. "And spectacle. A ball." Clara wanted to refuse. Julian held her hands. "We will face them together." She agreed. And on the night of the ball, dressed in midnight silk, Clara descended the stairs at his side. Eyes followed, whispers spread, and then they danced. Julian held her as if she belonged there, because she did, and by the end of the night, the whispers had changed. Clara did not know it yet, but the hardest test was almost over, and love, once chosen openly, would demand everything. The morning after the ball dawned quiet and clear, as if Montford House itself had exhaled after holding its breath for weeks. Clara woke with a strange mix of relief and fear twisting in her chest. The night before had been a triumph, but triumphs had a way of demanding payment. She dressed slowly and went down to the breakfast room. Julian was already there, standing by the window with a cup of untouched coffee in his hand. He turned when he heard her step inside. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. There was no distance now, no pretending. Whatever society said, whatever the papers printed, the truth stood plainly between them. "You were remarkable last night," Julian said. "They saw you, truly saw you." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "And still you stood," he replied. "That is who you are." Before she could answer, Eloin burst into the room. "Everyone was talking about you," she announced happily. "Grandmama says you conquered society." Clara laughed, the sound easing something tight inside her. If only it were truly over. The newspapers did not stop immediately, but the tone changed. Where once there had been venom, now there was uncertainty. Some praised her grace. Others retreated into silence. Invitations that had been withdrawn were quietly renewed. Julian watched it all with cold patience. When Clara worried aloud about Eloin's future, he took her hands firmly. "Our daughter will grow up knowing she was loved," he said. "That matters more than gossip ever could." Spring arrived early that year. With it came wedding preparations. Clara often felt as though she were standing in someone else's life. She moved through fittings, menus, guest lists, all while still teaching Eloin and managing the household. Only now, when servants bowed to her, did she feel the weight of what was changing. One afternoon, Julian called her into his study. "I have something for you," he said, sliding papers across the desk. Clara stared. "The mortgage," she whispered. "Paid," he said simply. "Your father's estate is yours again." Her breath caught. "I cannot accept this." "You already have," he said gently, "when you chose me. When you chose us." Tears blurred her vision. "No one has ever done this for me. No one has ever been you to me," he replied. The wedding took place on a bright April morning in the small chapel at Montford House. They chose intimacy over spectacle, friends over critics, family over society. Clara stood in ivory silk, her hands trembling slightly. Beatrice adjusted the orange blossoms in her hair with a smile full of pride. "You belong here," the Dowager Duchess said softly. "Never doubt it." When the chapel doors opened, Julian was waiting. The moment he saw her, his breath caught. No duke stood at the altar then, only a man in love. Eloin scattered rose petals ahead of Clara, solemn and thrilled. The vows were simple, the promises absolute. When Julian kissed his bride, the sound of joy rippled through the chapel. "Now we are a family," Eloin declared loudly. Laughter followed them into the garden, where the wedding breakfast waited under a blue sky. That evening, when the house had finally grown quiet, Julian led Clara to the library. "I wanted you to have this," he said, handing her a leather-bound journal. Inside were words written in his careful hand: confessions, gratitude, love. "I was wrong," he had written, "about strength, about control, about love." Clara pressed the book to her chest. "You gave me everything," she whispered. "No," he said, drawing her close. "We built it together." Years passed. Montford House filled with noise, laughter, and life. Eloin grew confident and bright. Then came Thomas, then Alexandra, then another child on the way. The cold halls of stone became a home. One spring afternoon, Clara stood on the terrace, watching their children race through the garden. Julian came up behind her, his arms circling her carefully. "Do you ever think about that day," he asked, "when you walked away?" "All the time," she said. "It was the moment everything changed," he replied, "for both of us." She leaned back against him, smiling. "You thought you could replace me." "I was wrong," he said without hesitation. "I never found another like you." Below them, their children laughed. The sound carried through the house, warm and unafraid. And in that laughter lived the truth neither of them had known at the beginning. Some things cannot be hired. Some hearts cannot be replaced. And love, once chosen bravely, changes everything.